My name is Tanya Dajan. I'm part of the Faculty of Science Educational Design and Development Team, or SEDIT. We provide a variety of services to the Faculty of Science teaching staff, including 3D printing, Blackboard design support, screen capture filming, and Lightboard video filming. This short video will only cover Lightboard filming, and it should help you decide if this style of video could be right to complement your teaching. We're going to cover what you should do before you come in, during filming, and afterwards. Let's get started. Okay, so before you arrive in the studio, what should you have prepared? The first thing is some good notes. Your notes should include what you will actually want to write on the Lightboard, as well as what you want to say. Don't try to fit too much visual information in at once. We have a lot of different techniques for covering that, and we'll talk about them later in the video. Another thing is to have had a bit of practice with your script. So making these videos is a skill, and you shouldn't expect to be able to get it perfect on your first try. Rehearsing your presentation before coming into the studio makes a big difference. Consider what you will wear. Try avoiding small stripes, as these can lead to a distracting optical illusion, and also try to avoid jarring patterns and low-collared shirts. We do have UQ shirts with special inverted logos available for the studio. You're welcome to come in and use one of these if you would like. You may also choose to bring in props. Finally, make sure we're informed ahead of time about what you want to film and what you'll need. It takes some time to get the studio set up just right. So the more information you give us, the better we'll be able to prepare before you come in, saving you some time. All right, let's move on to what it's like to be here and actually film with the Lightboard. You've arrived in the studio. What's it like once you get here? First, let's talk about your physical presence. It's important to stay more or less in the spot where you start. If you back up a lot as you speak, you can kind of fade into darkness. And if you come over and begin writing on the other side of the board, you'll overlay yourself with your writing, which is not ideal for your students. So stay in place. Next up is eye contact. There are two places that are ideal to look when you're in the studio. You can look either directly at the camera, which will give the effect of speaking to your audience, or you can look at your writing, either while you're speaking to it or while you're physically writing on the board. Looking up or to the side as you talk can be quite disengaging and disorienting for your audience. So really try to make that eye contact with the camera. What's great about filming, you can mess up as many times as you want. But in order to restart smoothly, you'll need to end your sentence and maintain eye contact with the camera and start your sentence the same way. If you mess up, if you mess up in this manner and try to correct yourself as you go, we can't make that a nice, easy cut. All right, so those are the big ones to consider about your physical presence while you're in the studio. What about the way you write on the board? Well, for one thing, erasing is very important here. You may notice if we wipe something out with our fingers, it doesn't work very well, and it'll just take patience to use the rag and erase it very thoroughly so that these smudges don't appear. Another thing to consider when you're in the studio is that you are constrained by space. Depending on your height and the angle of the camera, you'll have to make sure that you stay within the bounds of the screen. So that'll just take a bit of practice getting used to. Don't be too upset if we start and stop you several times so that we make sure that everything that you're putting on the board does actually stay on the board and not be lost to your students. Finally, we have our handwriting to consider. You don't need to be overly concerned about this, but you do want to be aware of certain styles that might confuse your students. For example, if you're writing the letter X, having letters that don't touch may be confusing in a math equation. Or if you have a stylized letter Z, you may want to consider writing something a bit simpler that will be immediately obvious to everyone in your audience. All right, so those are the basics while you're filming. Now here's a couple tips and tricks that you can use if you want to make your videos a bit more visually interesting. Avoid writing as... This is an easy habit to fall into. If you're used to using a normal whiteboard, you may want to talk as you write out sentences. In video form, it can be really slow and quite disengaging for a student to watch you do that. So instead, what I recommend is writing out the sentence without speaking, and we can then overlay your voice like this. Avoid writing as you speak. Using this technique, students still get the visual aid of seeing you write what you need to convey and hearing you say it without it having to be drawn out the way it normally would be when you're writing on a whiteboard. On that note, it's best to keep sentences short. If you've said it clearly, real estate is quite valuable in this area, so you don't need to write everything that you say on the board. If you have a chunk of text or a complex equation that you'd like put up, there is also the option for us to put it up in post. So for example, if I'd like a whole paragraph to appear, I can do so without actually having to write it while in the studio. At any time, err on the side of having less rather than more on the board, and it's quite easy to change it over. You might have a visual aid as well that you want to use repeatedly. So say I was working with the unit circle and I wanted to talk about cosine or something of that nature. And I want to draw something up here that goes with this information. But I actually want to keep this part of my drawing for reuse later on. We've actually drawn it on the other side of the board so that when we go to erase, that same figure is still going to be available for us when we now want to talk about something slightly different. Color is another powerful tool that you can consider before you come into the studio. So there's 3 ways color can sort of be used. You can have neutral, as we see here, where everything is in the same color. It's not really giving students very much information. Depending on your presentation, that might be fine. You might want to be a bit more explicit in what you use color for. So we may have set this up originally so that color is now giving some meaningful hints to the students watching this video, where the leaf title matches the actual image in the diagram. So this can be a bit more powerful than just using color in a neutral way. Finally, what you definitely want to avoid is using color in a way that's confusing. Sometimes it can be tempting to just pick up a pen and begin writing. But if we have things that are mismatched or not conveying information in a helpful way, we might actually lead to confusion among our students. Try to use a maximum of 4 colors when you're planning, as there's not too many different ones that will pop on this screen. Another fun trick you can do with the lightboard is use fast motion to your advantage. So as we saw with the writing before, you can also do things where you pause to write something and speed it up and then talk about it, essentially narrating yourself as you go. Let's do this with the drawing of a cube. First, draw one square. Then overlap another square over one of its corners. Finally, connect each respective corner of one square to the second square. There may be some times in your lectures or videos where you don't actually need to write anything on the lightboard. In this case, we can use this technique where we cut to your face for emphasis, so that you're really connecting directly with your audience just with your face. All right, you've been in the studio, you've filmed everything, you've used some amazing editing techniques and suggestions to get your message across. Now we're into the phase that we call post-production. So there are 2 really important things about this. First of all, we need to know in the studio what you'll need from us when you're leaving. Maybe you just bring your own hard drive, take your files with you, and you're done. Maybe you actually need to let us know that we'll be editing the video and sending you through the final version. What's really important if we are working with you in the post-production process is that you give us a time frame so that we know when to schedule your videos to be fully edited and sent back to you by. To summarize, before you come into the studio, be prepared with notes, try to have a round of practice, and tell us what you'll be doing before you come in. Consider your wardrobe and any props you might need, and don't expect to be perfect on your first try. Just give it a red hot go. Once you're actually in the studio, try to remember to have good eye contact, stand in one place, and use complete sentences when starting or stopping a cut. Use the lightboard intentionally. Consider things like color, the different editing techniques you might want us to use, and what you'll actually be writing on the board versus what you'll be saying. Once you're done, make sure we know what you need from us. That's about it. The Science Educational Design and Development team looks forward to working with you.